Hello everyone, welcome back to Buried Files. Tonight we return with another chilling collection of forgotten accounts buried deep in the shadows of America's highways. In this episode, we will dive deep into the heart of darkness with 8 terrifying tales of encounters from behind the wheel of 18-wheelers, adapted from true events reported by professional truckers who live to tell their stories. Each narrative has been carefully crafted, drawing from the eerie experiences of drivers who spend their nights navigating the endless stretches of asphalt where reality grows thin and the impossible becomes inevitable. From phantom hitchhikers who vanish without a trace to mysterious radio transmissions that predict the future, these accounts reveal the supernatural dangers that lurk along America's most desolate roadways. To protect the privacy of those involved, some names and locations have been altered, but the terror remains authentic. These are not urban legends passed down through generations, but fresh horrors experienced by modern-day road warriors who trusted us with their darkest encounters. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Buried Files for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. You learn to recognize other drivers on long hauls, familiar faces in familiar rigs. But what do you do when your own truck starts following you? My name is Derek Washington, and I have been running cross-country routes out of Detroit for 18 years. In all that time, I have seen just about everything the highway can throw at a driver. Weather, mechanical failures, crazy four-wheelers, and every kind of road hazard you can imagine. But nothing prepared me for the night my own truck started hunting me across 3 states. It started on September 9th, 2023, during what should have been a routine run from Detroit to Los Angeles. I was hauling auto parts for a GM facility, a load I had carried dozens of times before. My rig was a 2019 Kenworth W900 painted midnight blue with chrome exhaust stacks and my company logo on the doors. It was a beautiful truck, well-maintained and powerful, the kind of rig that other drivers noticed and remembered. The first day of the trip passed without incident. I made good time through Michigan, Indiana, and Illinois, stopping for my mandatory rest period at a truck stop outside St. Louis. I was ahead of schedule and feeling good about the run. The weather was perfect, traffic was light, and my truck was running like a dream. It was during my second day on the road somewhere in eastern Kansas when I first saw it. I was cruising along Interstate 70 in the early morning hours, watching the sun rise over the endless wheat fields, when I caught sight of another truck in my passenger mirror. Nothing unusual about that except for the fact that it looked exactly like mine. Same model Kenworth, same midnight blue paint job, same chrome stacks gleaming in the morning light. At first I thought it might be another driver from my company. We had a fleet of similar trucks, and it was not uncommon to cross paths on the major interstates. But as the other truck got closer, I could see details that made my skin crawl. It was not just similar to my truck, it was identical. The same scratch on the front bumper from a parking mishap in Toledo. The same faded spot on the driver's door where the sun had bleached the paint. Even the same mud flap configuration that I had custom ordered. The truck pulled into the left lane and began to pass me. I slowed down to get a better look at the driver, expecting to see someone I recognized from the company. But the cab windows were tinted so dark I could not see inside at all. As it passed, I tried to read the license plate, but the numbers seemed to shift and blur whenever I focused on them. After the truck had pulled ahead and disappeared over a hill, I grabbed my CB radio and tried to make contact. Breaker 19. This is Motor City heading west on I-70. Just saw another blue Kenworth that looked familiar. Driver, you got your ears on? Nothing but static answered me. I tried again using different channels but got no response. That was strange because most professional Drivers monitored the CB even when they were not actively talking. I did not see the truck again for the next several hours, and I started to convince myself that it had just been a coincidence. Maybe another company had ordered the same model and color combination. Maybe the similarities I had noticed were just tricks of light and distance. But that afternoon, while I was stopped for fuel at a truck stop in western Kansas, I saw it again. The identical Kenworth was parked at the diesel pumps on the opposite side of the station. From a distance, it looked so much like my own truck that I actually walked over to check my parking spot to make sure I had not forgotten where I left it. As I got closer to the other truck, the details became even more disturbing. It was not just painted the same color as mine, it had the same company decals in the exact same positions, the same tire brand, the same style of mirrors, even the same type of mud flaps with my company logo. It was like looking at a perfect duplicate of my own rig. The cab door was open, but I could not see anyone inside. I walked around to the driver's side, expecting to find the owner filling out paperwork or taking a break. Instead, the cab was empty, but the engine was running and the driver's seat was adjusted to exactly the same position as mine. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone there?" No answer. I noticed that the fuel nozzle was in the tank, but no fuel was flowing. The pump display showed 0 gallons and $0, as if it had been hanging there for hours without being activated. That was when I saw something that made me back away quickly. On the driver's seat was a logbook, and through the open door I could see that it was filled out in my own handwriting. Same routes, same dates, same entries I had made in my own logbook. But that was impossible because my logbook was locked in my truck 50 yards away. I ran back to my own rig and checked my cab. Sure enough, my logbook was right where I had left it, with the same entries I had just seen in the other truck. Somehow, the duplicate truck had an exact copy of my personal records. I finished fueling as quickly as possible and got back on the road, but I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every few minutes I would check my mirrors, half expecting to see the other Kenworth behind me. When I did not see it, I felt relieved and terrified at the same time. As darkness fell, I started looking for a place to take my mandatory rest period. There was a large truck stop ahead at the junction of I-70 and Highway 83, a place I had stopped before on previous trips. It had good security, clean facilities, and plenty of parking. I pulled into the lot and found a space under one of the bright security lights where I would be able to see anyone approaching my truck. After completing my pre-trip inspection and securing my load, I climbed into my sleeper berth and tried to get some rest. But sleep would not come. Every time I started to drift off, I would hear sounds from outside. Footsteps on gravel, the hiss of air brakes, the rumble of a diesel engine that sounded exactly like mine. I would look out my window, but the parking lot appeared empty except for the usual collection of trucks belonging to other drivers. Around 2 a.m., I was startled awake by the sound of my own CB radio crackling to life. A voice came through the static, and it took me several seconds to realize that it was my own voice. "Motor City, this is Motor City. Do you copy?" I grabbed the handset with shaking fingers. "Who is this? How do you have my call sign?" "I am you," my own voice replied through the radio. "The you that made different choices, the you that took different roads." "That is impossible." "Is it? How many times have you wondered what your life would be like if you had chosen differently? If you had taken that job with the other company? If you had married Jennifer instead of letting her go? If you had been there when your father had his heart attack instead of being stuck in traffic in Denver?" Each question hit me like a physical blow. Those were the exact regrets that kept me awake during long nights on the road, the what-ifs that haunted my quiet moments. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want what is rightfully mine. I want the life you stole from me when you made the wrong choices." Through my windshield, I could see the other truck now. It was parked directly across from me, about 30 yards away. The headlights were on, aimed straight at my cab, but they were not the normal white glow of LED lights. These were red, like the eyes of some predatory animal. "You cannot have my life," I said into the radio. "It is mine, good and bad, right and wrong. We will see about that." The other truck started moving, backing out of its parking space with mechanical precision. But instead of heading for the exit, it turned toward me. The red headlights grew brighter as it approached, and I could hear the rumble of its engine getting louder. I started my own truck and threw it into gear, pulling out of my parking space just as the other Kenworth reached the spot where I had been. It followed me as I drove toward the truck stop exit, matching my speed exactly and staying about 20 feet behind me. I floored the accelerator as I merged onto Interstate 70, but the other truck kept pace effortlessly. When I tried to change lanes, it changed lanes. When I slowed down, it slowed down. It was like looking in a mirror, except the reflection was independent and malevolent. For the next 6 hours, as I drove through the night across Kansas and into Colorado, the other truck stayed right behind me. Sometimes it would drop back until it was barely visible in my mirrors, then suddenly surge forward until its red headlights filled my rear window. It was playing with me like a cat with a mouse. I tried everything I could think of to lose it. I took random exits and doubled back, drove through small towns on back roads, even pulled into a 24-hour truck stop and waited for 2 hours. But every time I thought I had escaped, the red headlights would appear in my mirrors again. As dawn broke over the Colorado plains, I was exhausted and running low on fuel. I had to stop whether I wanted to or not. There was a truck stop at the Lyman exit, and I pulled in hoping that daylight would somehow break whatever spell was keeping me trapped in this nightmare. I parked at the fuel island and got out to pump diesel, keeping one eye on my mirrors at all times. The other truck was nowhere to be seen, and for a moment I thought my ordeal was over. But as I was replacing the fuel nozzle, I heard my own voice behind me. "Hello, Derek." I turned around and found myself face to face with myself. He looked exactly like me, down to the same clothes I was wearing and the same 3-day stubble on his face. But his eyes were different, filled with a cold hatred that made my blood freeze. "You have led me on quite a chase," he said in my voice. "But this ends now." "What are you?" "I told you I am you. The version of you that made the right choices, lived the right life. And now I am going to take it back." He stepped closer and I could smell something wrong about him, something that reminded me of ozone and burning electrical components. "All you have to do is switch places with me, take my truck, live my regrets. It will only hurt for a moment." "No," I said, backing away. "I do not know what kind of trick this is, but I am not falling for it. It is not a trick. It is justice. You have been living a lie, Derek, living a life that was meant for someone else. Time to give it back." He lunged forward, reaching for me with hands that flickered and wavered like a heat mirage. I dodged to the side and ran toward the truck stop building where other people would be able to see what was happening. But when I looked back, both he and his truck had vanished. The parking lot was empty except for my own rig sitting alone at the fuel pump. I drove the rest of the way to Los Angeles without seeing the other truck again, but I never felt safe. Every set of headlights in my mirrors made me nervous. Every other Kenworth on the highway made my heart race. I have been driving for 6 months since that night, and I have never seen my double again. But sometimes when I am alone on dark highways, I can feel him out there somewhere, still following, still hunting, still trying to reclaim what he thinks is rightfully his. The worst part is not knowing if he was real or if I am slowly losing my mind. But real or not, he changed something fundamental about how I see the road and myself. Now I know that every choice creates a shadow, every path not taken leaves a ghost behind. And sometimes those ghosts get tired of being ignored. Let me tell you about the night my CB radio started picking up something that was not supposed to be there. I am Diane Rodriguez, and I have been running loads between Phoenix and Albuquerque for the better part of 15 years. The desert highways between Arizona and New Mexico are my territory, roads I know like the back of my weathered hands. But on March 3rd, 2024, those familiar routes became something else entirely. I was hauling a load of construction equipment from Phoenix to Santa Fe, a run I had made hundreds of times before. It was one of those perfect desert nights where the stars seemed close enough to touch and the horizon stretched endlessly in every direction. My rig was humming smoothly along Interstate 40, and I was making good time despite leaving later than planned due to a loading delay. Around 1:15 a.m., somewhere between Flagstaff and Winslow, I decided to check in on Channel 19, the standard trucker frequency. The radio had been unusually quiet all evening, which was strange for a major interstate route. Usually there would be at least some chatter, drivers warning about speed traps or sharing information about rest stops ahead. Breaker 19, this is Desert Rose eastbound at mile marker 233, I called out using my handle. Anyone got their ears on out there? Static answered me for several seconds before a voice came through clear as crystal despite the remote location. Desert Rose, this is Night Rider. I copy you loud and clear. The voice belonged to a man, probably middle-aged, with a slight southern accent that was hard to place. Nothing unusual about that. Truckers come from all over, and handles like Night Rider were common enough. Good to hear another voice out here, Night Rider. Pretty quiet tonight. It is about to get a lot less quiet, he replied. You need to slow down, Desert Rose. There is trouble ahead. I glanced at my speedometer. I was doing 65 in a 75 zone, well within safe limits for the conditions. What kind of trouble are we talking about? Multi-vehicle accident at mile marker 248, 3 cars and a livestock trailer. You have got about 12 minutes before you hit the backup. Better take the Winslow exit and find an alternate route. I checked my GPS. Mile marker 248 was indeed about 12 minutes ahead at my current speed. But there was no traffic alert showing on my system, no reports of accidents or delays. Still, fellow drivers looking out for each other was part of the code of the road. Thanks for the heads up, Night Rider. You just come through there? Something like that, he said. Stay safe out there, Desert Rose. I took his advice and pulled off at the Winslow exit, even though it would add 30 minutes to my trip. Better safe than sorry. As I wound through the smaller state highways that would eventually reconnect me with Interstate 40, I kept thinking about that conversation. Something about Night Rider's voice had bothered me, though I could not put my finger on what. About an hour later, I merged back onto the interstate past where the accident was supposed to have happened. The road was completely clear, no sign of any incident, no debris, no emergency vehicles. I grabbed my CB again. Night Rider, this is Desert Rose, just past mile marker 248. Road looks clear from here. Maybe they got it cleaned up faster than expected. No response. I tried again, but only static came back. I figured he had probably moved on to a different route or was out of range. The next night, I was running the same route with a load of electronics. Same time, same stretch of highway between Flagstaff and Winslow. At exactly 1:15 a.m., my CB crackled to life. Desert Rose, this is Night Rider. I nearly jumped out of my seat. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. Night Rider, good to hear from you again. How did you know I was out here? I have been waiting for you, he said. You need to pull over at the next rest area. Your left rear trailer tire is about to blow. You have maybe 6 minutes before it goes. I glanced at my mirrors. Everything looked normal, but tire problems were serious business, especially on a loaded truck. The Desert Oasis rest area was coming up in about 5 miles. I had no choice but to trust him. Roger that, Night Rider. Heading to Desert Oasis now. Good choice, he replied. Check the inside dual on your left side. You will find a nail about 3 inches from the sidewall. I reached the rest area and parked under the bright security lights. When I walked around to inspect my tires, my blood ran cold. There it was, exactly where he said it would be. A roofing nail embedded in the tire, positioned in such a way that it would have caused a catastrophic blowout within minutes. My hands shaking, I grabbed my CB. Knight Rider, how the hell did you know about that nail? Silence. Then after a long pause. Some things are easier to see from where I am. Desert Rose. Where exactly are you? Everywhere and nowhere. Mile marker 267 forever and always. Mile marker 267, I knew that spot, about 15 miles east of where I was sitting. It was where a trucker had died in a rollover accident several years back. I remembered reading about it in the trade magazines. The driver had been hauling electronics just like I was tonight. A tire blowout on a curve had sent him into the median. The truck had caught fire. Knight Rider, I said quietly. What is your real name? Robert Hayes, he replied after a moment. But I have been Knight Rider for longer than I can remember. Robert Hayes. I knew that name. He was the driver who died at mile marker 267. It had been 5 years ago, maybe 6, a veteran trucker with 30 years of experience taken out by a simple tire failure. Robert, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You died in 2018. Your truck rolled at mile marker 267 after a tire blowout. I know, he said simply. I remember every second of it. The way the steering wheel jerked out of my hands, the feeling of the trailer pushing the cab sideways, the sound of metal tearing and glass breaking, and then the fire. Tears were rolling down my cheeks now. Then why are you still here? Why are you talking to me? Because this is where I belong. These roads, this frequency, channel 19, I spent more time here than anywhere else when I was alive. It feels right to keep doing what I always did, looking out for other drivers. I sat in my cab for a long time after that, staring out at the empty desert. The rest area was deserted except for me, and the silence felt heavy and strange after the conversation I had just had. Robert, I finally said, how many drivers have you warned? You are the first one who listened, the first one who believed. Most people just think it is interference or someone playing pranks. Over the next few months, Knight Rider became a regular part of my runs through that stretch of highway. He would always know exactly when I was coming through, always at the same time, always with warnings that turned out to be accurate. A washout ahead during monsoon season, a drunk driver weaving through traffic. Construction delays that would not show up on traffic apps for another hour. He saved my life at least 3 times that I can count, and probably more that I never knew about. But the conversations were always brief, professional, focused on immediate safety concerns. It was not until late summer that he started talking about more personal things. Do you ever miss it? I asked him one night after he had warned me about a speed trap near Flagstaff. Miss what? Being alive, having a body, going home to people who love you. There was a long pause before he answered. I miss the smell of my wife's coffee in the morning. I miss the weight of my dog sleeping across my feet. I miss the feeling of being tired at the end of a long haul, that bone-deep satisfaction of a job well done. Why do you stay? Why not move on to whatever comes next? Because drivers are still dying out here, he said. Every week someone does not make it home. Tired drivers, mechanical failures, weather, drunk idiots and four-wheelers who do not understand how much damage they can do. If I can prevent even one more family from getting that phone call, then staying is worth it. I understood then. Robert Hayes had found his purpose in death, the same purpose he had served in life. keeping his fellow drivers safe on dangerous roads. The last time I spoke with Knight Rider was in December of 2024, almost a year after our first contact. I was making what would turn out to be my final run through Arizona before taking a local job closer to home. He seemed to know. "This is goodbye, is it not, Desert Rose?" "How did you know?" "I just do. I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "Robert, you are the one who saved my life more times than I can count." "You listened," he said simply. "You believed. You treated me like I was still human, still mattered. That meant more than you know." I retired from over-the-road trucking a month later, but I still monitor Channel 19 sometimes when I am driving local routes. I have never heard from Knight Rider again, but other drivers have started reporting similar encounters on that stretch of Interstate 40. A helpful voice on the radio, warnings that save lives, a presence watching over the endless miles of asphalt that connect our country. They call him the Guardian now, and his legend is spreading to other highways, other routes. Maybe Robert Hayes has inspired other lost souls to stay and help. Maybe the roads themselves are calling to those who loved them most in life. All I know is that somewhere out there on Channel 19, voices are still looking out for each other in the darkness, and sometimes the best guardian angels are the ones who never stop driving. Every trucker has their regular stops, places that feel like home. Johnson's Truck Plaza in Missouri was mine until I met myself there. My name is Billy Ray Patterson, and I have been running freight out of Nashville for the better part of 27 years. In all that time, Johnson's was my sanctuary, a familiar beacon on the endless stretch of Interstate 70 where I could count on good food, clean showers, and friendly faces who knew my name. The truck stop sat at mile marker 187, right on the Missouri-Kansas border, surrounded by nothing but cornfields and prairie grass that stretched to the horizon. It was one of those old-school places that had been serving drivers since the 1960s, with a diner that still made everything from scratch and mechanics who could fix any rig ever built. The owner, Earl Johnson, had inherited the place from his father and ran it with the same dedication to treating truckers like family. I had been stopping at Johnson's twice a week for over a decade, every Tuesday and Friday without fail. The routine was always the same. Fuel up at Pump 7, grab a shower, then settle into my usual booth in the back corner of the diner where I could watch the parking lot while I ate. Betty, the waitress who had been there almost as long as Earl, would bring me coffee and apple pie without me even asking. It was the closest thing to home I had on the road. That all changed on October 12th, 2023. I was running late that day, delayed by a breakdown outside of Springfield that had cost me 3 hours. Instead of arriving at Johnson's around noon like usual, I rolled into the lot just after 6 p.m. The autumn sun was setting behind the cornfields, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded me why I loved this job despite all its hardships. I pulled into my usual parking spot and went through my normal routine. Fuel first, then shower, then food. Everything seemed perfectly normal until I walked into the diner. Betty was behind the counter, same as always, but when she looked up and saw me, her face went white as a sheet. "Billy Ray?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "Same thing I do every Friday, darling," I replied, confused by her reaction. "Got held up by some mechanical trouble, but I made it." She stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. "But Billy Ray, you are already here. You have been sitting in your usual booth for the past 2 hours." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean I am already here?" She pointed toward the back of the diner, toward my regular booth in the corner, and there, sitting with his back to me, was someone wearing the exact same red flannel shirt I had on, the same worn baseball cap, even the same scuffed work boots. From behind, he looked exactly like me. "That is not possible," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew something was terribly wrong. The figure in the booth seemed to sense our conversation. He turned around slowly, and when I saw his face, my knees nearly buckled. It was me. Not someone who looked like me, not a relative or a stranger with similar features. It was my face, my eyes, my weathered skin and graying beard. Even the small scar above my left eyebrow from a childhood accident was there. He smiled when he saw me, a cold expression that I had never seen in any mirror. "Well, well," he said in my voice. "Looks like you finally made it." The diner fell completely silent. The other truckers, the locals having dinner, even the cook in the kitchen seemed to freeze. Betty dropped her coffee pot and the crash of ceramic on tile echoed through the room like a gunshot. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, though I was not sure I wanted to know the answer. "I am you," he replied simply. "Or rather, I am who you could have been, should have been." He stood up from the booth and I noticed he was not just wearing the same clothes as me. He was wearing my exact clothes. The same rip in the knee of my jeans, the same oil stain on my shirt sleeve, even the same scratch on my belt buckle from when I had dropped a wrench last month. "That is impossible," I said again. "Is it?" He walked closer and I could see details that made my skin crawl. He had the same calluses on his hands from years of handling tie-down straps. The same slight limp in his left leg from an old back injury. Even the same habit of rubbing his chin when he was thinking. Think about it, Billy Ray. How many times have you wondered what your life would be like if you had made different choices? What kind of choices? The choice to stay home instead of taking that first long-haul job. The choice to marry Sarah Mitchell instead of letting her slip away. The choice to be there when your daddy had his heart attack instead of being stuck in traffic outside of Amarillo. Each word hit me like a physical blow. Those were the regrets I carried with me on every mile of every trip, the what-ifs that kept me awake during mandatory rest breaks. "I am the version of you that made the right choices," he continued. "The one who stayed in Nashville and opened that garage you always dreamed about. The one who married Sarah and raised 3 beautiful children. The one who was holding his father's hand when he passed away instead of getting the news from a payphone at a truck stop in Texas." "That is not how life works," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Is it not?" He gestured around the diner. "Look at this place, Billy Ray. Really look at it." For the first time, I noticed that something was off about Johnson's. The details were all wrong. The counter was on the wrong side of the room. The jukebox that had been broken for years was playing music. The pictures on the walls showed truckers I did not recognize, rigs from decades that had not happened yet. "This is not Johnson's," I whispered. "No, it is not. This is the place between choices, Billy Ray. The crossroads where all the different versions of our life meet. And tonight, you get to choose which one you want to keep." Betty appeared at my elbow with a cup of coffee, but when I looked at her, she was not Betty anymore. She was Sarah Mitchell, the woman I had loved and lost 30 years ago. She looked exactly as she had the day I left Nashville for my first cross-country run, promising I would be back in a week to take her to dinner. "Hello, Billy," she said softly. "I have been waiting for you." Tears streamed down my face as I looked at her. She was just as beautiful as I remembered, with the same gentle smile and kind eyes that had haunted my dreams for 3 decades. "Sarah, I am so sorry. I should have stayed. I should have chosen you instead of the road." "I know," she said, "but you can choose differently now. He can show you how." I turned back to my doppelganger, who was watching with that same cold smile. "What do you want from me?" "I want to trade places," he said. "You take my life, the one with Sarah and the children and the garage and the father who lived to see his grandchildren born. I will take yours, The endless highways and empty diners and motel rooms that all look the same. Why would you want that? His expression changed, and for a moment I saw something desperate in his eyes. Because I have never seen a sunset over the prairie. I have never felt the freedom of the open road. I have never known what it is like to be completely alone with my thoughts for hours at a time. My life is full of love and family and responsibility, but I have never been free. I looked back at Sarah, who was still holding the coffee cup with that patient smile. Is it real? Would I really have all of that? As real as this conversation, my double said. As real as the choice you are about to make. For a long moment, I stood there considering. The life he was offering was everything I had ever wanted. A chance to undo my biggest mistakes, to live the life I should have had. But something about it felt wrong. What happens to the real Billy Ray Patterson if I take your place? I asked. He hesitated just long enough for me to know the answer. He ceases to exist. Just like I will cease to exist if you refuse. And the people in your life, Sarah and the children, would they know the difference? Does it matter? You would love them just as much as I do. Maybe more? I thought about that for a while, staring into Sarah's eyes and remembering everything we could have had together. Then I looked around the impossible diner, at the other truckers who were frozen in time, at the version of myself who was offering me everything I thought I wanted. No, I said finally. No? He looked genuinely surprised. I have spent 30 years regretting the choices I made, but they are my choices, my regrets, my life. I earned every mile, every mistake, every lonely night. You are offering me someone else's happiness, and that is not the same thing. His face twisted with rage. You fool! Do you have any idea what you are giving up? I know exactly what I am giving up, but I also know what I would be giving up if I stayed. The freedom you envy so much, the independence, the knowledge that I built my life with my own hands, even if it is not the life I planned. The diner began to fade around us, the impossible details dissolving like smoke. Sarah's image flickered and wavered before disappearing entirely. My doppelganger was fading too, becoming translucent. This is your last chance, he said desperately. Choose differently, Billy Ray. Choose better. I choose to be myself, I replied, mistakes and all. He let out a scream of frustration as he vanished completely. The diner snapped back to its proper configuration, with the counter on the right side and the broken jukebox silent in the corner. Betty was back, looking exactly as she always had, pouring coffee for a table of local farmers who were discussing corn prices. She looked up when she saw me. Billy Ray, you're running late tonight. Your usual? Yeah, Betty. The usual would be fine. I sat in my regular booth and tried to process what had just happened. Part of me wondered if I had imagined the entire thing, if the stress and exhaustion had finally gotten to me. But then I noticed something on the table that had not been there before. It was a photograph, old and creased, showing a man who looked exactly like me standing in front of a garage with a sign that read Patterson Auto Repair. Next to him was a woman who might have been Sarah, and 3 children who had my eyes. On the back, someone had written, "The road not taken." I kept that photograph for a while, tucked into my sun visor as a reminder of the choice I had made. Eventually, though, I threw it away. Some roads are better left unexplored, and some choices are better left unmade. I still stop at Johnson's every Tuesday and Friday, same as always. Betty still brings me coffee and pie without being asked. And sometimes, late at night when the parking lot is empty and the prairie wind is howling through the corn, I think I can see another version of myself sitting in that booth, living a different life. But I never regret the choice I made. The road I chose may be lonely, but it is mine. Time works differently on the road, but nothing prepared me for the night. Route 666 through New Mexico decided it did not want to end. My name is Angela Foster, and I have been hauling freight out of Seattle for 12 years. In all that time, covering every major highway from the Pacific Northwest to the Gulf Coast, I thought I had experienced every strange thing the road could throw at me. I was wrong. It was November 27th, 2023, and I was running behind schedule on a priority load of computer equipment from Albuquerque to Phoenix. The customer was paying premium rates for delivery by morning, which meant driving through the night on some of the most desolate stretches of highway in the Southwest. Most drivers avoid Route 666 whenever possible. The locals call it the Devil's Highway, and it has a reputation for breakdowns, accidents, and general bad luck that keeps all but the most desperate truckers away. But I needed the money, and I had driven worse roads in worse conditions. Route 666 was just another stretch of asphalt as far as I was concerned, a direct shot through the high desert that would save me 2 hours compared to taking I-40 around. The dispatcher had warned me about construction delays on the interstate, so the choice was easy. Take the Devil's Highway or miss my delivery window. I turned off I-40 just after midnight, following the faded signs that pointed toward Route 666. The road immediately felt different from the major interstate, narrower, darker, with no streetlights or reflectors to guide the way. Just 2 lanes of cracked pavement disappearing into an endless void of desert scrub and distant mountains. The first sign that something was wrong came about 30 minutes in. I passed a mile marker that read mile 47, which seemed about right for how far I had traveled. But 10 minutes later, I passed another sign that also read mile 47, then another one after that. I grabbed my CB radio and tried to raise anyone who might be monitoring the channel. Breaker 19, this is Emerald City westbound on Route 666. Anyone got their ears on out there? Nothing but static answered me. I tried my cell phone, but there was no signal. Not unusual in this part of the desert, but it added to the growing sense of unease that was settling in my stomach like a cold stone. I kept driving, telling myself that the mile markers were probably just old and hadn't been updated properly. Desert highways were notorious for poor maintenance. But as the minutes stretched into hours, I passed more signs for mile 47. Dozens of them, all identical, all marking the exact same spot on a road that should have been taking me steadily west toward Arizona. That was when I started paying attention to the landmarks. There was a distinctive rock formation about a quarter-mile south of the road, 3 red sandstone pillars that looked like fingers reaching toward the sky. I had noticed it earlier and used it as a reference point. But now I was seeing it again and again. The same formation, in the same position every few minutes. I pulled over and got out of my cab, leaving the engine running and the headlights on. The desert air was cold and thin, carrying the smell of sage and something else I could not identify. Something that reminded me of ozone, like the air before a thunderstorm, except the sky above was clear and filled with more stars than I had ever seen in my life. I walked to the front of my truck and looked down the road ahead. The headlights illuminated about 100 yards of empty asphalt before the darkness swallowed everything. Behind me, the road looked exactly the same. No beginning, no end. Just an infinite line of pavement stretching in both directions. My GPS had stopped working hours ago, frozen on a map that showed Route 666 as a simple straight line with no mile markers or reference points. The clock on my dashboard read 3:47 a.m., but it had been reading 3:47 a.m. for the past hour. Time itself seemed to have stopped on this impossible highway. I got back in the truck and tried to think rationally about what was happening. Maybe I was having some kind of breakdown, psychological or physical. Long-haul trucking took a toll on the mind and body. and I had been pushing myself hard for weeks to make up for lost income from a mechanical failure the previous month. But the truck was running perfectly. My vital signs felt normal, and I could think clearly about everything except the fact that I seemed to be trapped on a road that went nowhere and everywhere at the same time. I decided to try an experiment. Instead of continuing west, I would turn around and head back toward Interstate 40. Even if I missed my delivery window, getting off this cursed stretch of highway was more important than any paycheck. I found a wide spot in the road and executed a careful three-point turn, swinging my trailer around until I was facing the opposite direction. The headlights now illuminated the road I had just traveled, which looked identical to the road I had been heading toward. Same cracked asphalt, same faded centerline, same mile markers for mile 47 appearing at regular intervals. I drove for what felt like hours in the opposite direction, passing the same landmarks in reverse order. The three red pillars, a dead Joshua tree twisted into an impossible shape, a rusted billboard advertising a casino that had closed decades ago. All familiar sights from my westbound journey now appearing on my left instead of my right. But I never reached I-40. No matter how far I drove or how long I maintained speed, the highway stretched endlessly ahead of me with no sign of the interstate junction where I had entered this nightmare. That was when I saw the other truck. It appeared in my headlights suddenly, a massive semi hauling what looked like a livestock trailer. The rig was ancient, probably from the 1970s, with faded paint and rust eating through the chrome. It was parked, sideways across both lanes, completely blocking the road. I brought my truck to a stop about 50 yards away and grabbed my flashlight. The other driver was nowhere to be seen, but the cab door was hanging open and swaying gently in the desert wind. I approached cautiously, calling out to see if anyone needed help. The cab was empty, but it looked like it had been abandoned recently. The keys were still in the ignition, and there was a cup of coffee on the dashboard that was still warm to the touch. On the passenger seat was a logbook, its pages yellowed with age. The most recent entry was dated November 27th, 1987. Exactly 36 years ago to the day. The entry was written in shaky handwriting. Trapped on Route 666. Time has stopped. Mile markers all read 47. God help me, I think I am going to be here forever. I felt ice water flood my veins as I read those words. This driver had experienced exactly what I was going through, but decades earlier. I flipped through more pages of the logbook, finding similar entries dating back years. Different handwriting, different dates, but all describing the same impossible situation. Day 3 on the endless road. Fuel gauge has not moved. Clock still shows 2:15 a.m. Week 2 saw another truck today, but the driver was gone. Left my own truck to join the graveyard. Month unknown. Time has no meaning here. I walk the road now, searching for an exit that does not exist. I dropped the logbook and ran back to my truck, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the diesel engine. But as I reached for my door handle, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming from somewhere in the darkness beyond my headlights. "Hello?" I called out. "Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped. Then from the darkness, a voice answered. It was rough and dry, like someone who had not spoken in years. "You are new here." "Where is here?" I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know. "The road between roads, the highway that connects all highways. Some call it hell, but it is not hot enough for that. Just empty, forever empty." A figure emerged from the darkness at the edge of my headlight beam. It was a man in a trucker's uniform, but the clothes were decades out of date and covered in dust. His face was gaunt and weathered, with eyes that held no hope. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "Since 1982, he replied. "Or maybe 1995. Time gets confused after a while. I have walked this road for so long I forgot what the exit looked like. More figures began appearing from the darkness. Men and women in trucking clothes from different eras, all with the same haunted expressions. Some carried CB radios that crackled with static. Others held logbooks filled with desperate entries. All of them had the look of people who had given up hope long ago. "There has to be a way out," I said desperately. "There always is." The first man shook his head sadly. "We all thought that once. Kept driving, kept searching, kept believing we would find the end of the road. But there is no end. There is only mile 47 forever and always." I looked back at my truck, then at the gathering crowd of lost drivers. "I am not staying here. I refuse to accept this." "Acceptance comes eventually," another voice said. It belonged to a woman in a leather jacket who might have been driving trucks since the 1960s. "Fighting it only makes the waiting harder." But I was not ready to give up. I climbed back into my cab and slammed the door, locking it behind me. Through the windshield, I could see the lost drivers watching me with expressions of pity and understanding. I put the truck in gear and drove straight at the abandoned rig, blocking the road. At the last second, I swerved hard to the right, taking my truck off the pavement and into the desert scrub. The cab bounced and lurched as I fought to maintain control, but I kept the throttle down and pushed through the rough terrain. Behind me, I could hear the lost drivers calling out warnings and pleas, but I ignored them. If Route 666 wanted to trap me in an endless loop, I would find my own way out. I drove through the desert for what felt like hours, navigating by the stars and following my compass west toward where Arizona should be. The truck took a beating from the rough ground, but the engine kept running and the wheels kept turning. Just as my fuel gauge finally started to move toward empty, I saw lights ahead. Real lights, not the phantom illumination of the cursed highway. I pushed the throttle harder and burst through a line of scrub brush to find myself on Interstate 40, exactly where it should be. I pulled into the first truck stop I could find and called my dispatcher to report the delay. I told him I had taken a detour due to mechanical problems, which was not entirely a lie. Some problems could not be explained in a logbook entry. I made my delivery 12 hours late and lost the bonus payment, but I had never been happier to pay a penalty fee in my life. The customer was understanding and my dispatcher found me another load heading back towards Seattle. I have never driven Route 666 again, and I never will. But sometimes on long nights when the highway stretches endlessly ahead and the mile markers seem to blur together, I think about those lost drivers still walking that impossible road. I wonder if they are still there, still searching for an exit that may not exist. And I say a prayer that they eventually find their way home. In 20 years of hauling freight, I never asked what was in the trailers. That changed when something in my cargo started knocking back. My name is Jimmy Sullivan, and I have been running routes out of Boston since 2004. In all those years, through every kind of weather and road condition you can imagine, I learned to mind my own business when it came to the loads I was carrying. As long as the paperwork was in order and the weight was within legal limits, I did not care if I was hauling televisions or toilet paper. That philosophy served me well until December 14th, 2023, when I picked up what would become the most terrifying cargo of my career. The load originated from a medical supply company in Hartford, Connecticut. Nothing unusual about that. I had hauled medical equipment before, everything from hospital beds to X-ray machines. The dispatcher told me it was bound for a research facility outside of Atlanta. A straightforward run down I-95 and I-85 that would take about 12 hours with stops. When I arrived at the loading dock, I immediately noticed something strange about the operation. Instead of the usual team of warehouse workers with forklifts, there were only 2 men in white lab coats supervising the loading. They were not doing any of the physical work themselves, just watching as a specialized crew used equipment I had never seen before to load 6 large containers into my trailer. The containers were about the size of refrigerators made from some kind of brushed metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Each one was marked with biohazard symbols and serial numbers, but no description of contents. Heavy-duty restraining straps held them in place, more than I had ever seen used for standard cargo. "What am I hauling?" I asked the supervisor, a thin man with nervous eyes who kept checking his watch. "Biological samples," he replied curtly. "Temperature-controlled, highly sensitive. Do not open the trailer under any circumstances and maintain a constant speed whenever possible. Vibrations can damage the specimens." He handed me a sealed envelope along with the standard bill of lading. "These are special instructions. Do not open them unless you encounter problems." "What kind of problems?" "You will know if it happens," he said cryptically. "Just get them to Atlanta as quickly and quietly as possible." I should have asked more questions, but the pay was exceptional. Nearly double my usual rate for what seemed like a routine medical transport. The company was legitimate, the paperwork was in order, and I had a mortgage to pay. So I signed the delivery receipt, sealed the trailer, and started the long drive south. The first few hours passed without incident. Traffic was light, the weather was clear, and my rig was running smoothly. The trailer felt heavier than usual, but the weight was distributed evenly and the load seemed stable. I made good time through Connecticut and New York, stopping only for fuel and a quick meal at a rest area in New Jersey. It was somewhere around Baltimore, about 6 hours into the trip, when I first heard the noise. At first, I thought it was just the normal sounds of a loaded trailer, the creaking and settling that happens when cargo shifts slightly during turns or lane changes. But this was different. It sounded like tapping, rhythmic and deliberate, coming from somewhere behind my cab. I pulled over at the next truck stop and walked around my rig, checking the tires and trailer connections. Everything looked normal. The seals on the trailer doors were intact. The temperature gauge was reading properly, and there were no signs of damage or mechanical problems. But when I put my ear against the side of the trailer, I could hear it clearly. Tap, 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 like someone knocking on the inside of the container walls. I climbed back into my cab and grabbed my CB radio. "Breaker 19. This is Boston Strong southbound on I-95. Anyone ever haul biological samples that make noise?" A voice crackled back through the static. "Boston Strong, this is Roadrunner. What kind of noise we talking about?" "Sounds like knocking, tapping, coming from inside the trailer." "Probably just thermal expansion, buddy. Temperature changes can make metal containers pop and crack. Nothing to worry about." That made sense. Medical samples would be kept at specific temperatures, and the cooling systems could cause the containers to expand and contract as they cycled. I thanked Roadrunner and got back on the highway, feeling slightly better about the situation. But the noises continued, and as the miles passed, they seemed to be getting more frequent and more complex. Instead of random tapping, I started hearing what sounded almost like patterns. 3 quick taps, followed by 2 slow ones, then 5 rapid taps in succession. It reminded me of Morse code, though I could not decipher any meaning from it. By the time I reached the Virginia border, the noises had evolved into something that made my skin crawl. Along with the tapping, I could hear what sounded like scratching, as if something was clawing at the inside of the containers. And underneath it all, a low humming sound that seemed to vibrate through the entire trailer. I pulled into a rest area near Fredericksburg and called the dispatcher who had given me the load. "There is something wrong with this cargo," I told him. "It is making noises like there is something alive in there." "Impossible," he replied immediately. "Those are sealed biological samples. Nothing in there could be alive." Then explain the knocking and scratching. There was a long pause before he answered. Just deliver the load, Sullivan. You are being paid well enough not to ask questions. Something in his tone made me more nervous than the sounds coming from my trailer. I hung up the phone and walked back to my rig, where I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The temperature gauge on the trailer was fluctuating wildly. It had been holding steady at 38 degrees Fahrenheit for the entire trip, but now it was swinging between freezing and nearly 70 degrees. Whatever cooling system was supposed to be maintaining the samples was failing. I opened the sealed envelope the supervisor had given me back in Hartford. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a phone number and a brief message. If samples exceed temperature parameters for more than 1 hour, call this number immediately. Do not attempt to open containers. Do not remain in proximity to trailer for extended periods. The phone number had a Georgia area code. I dialed it with shaking fingers. Sample transport emergency line, a woman's voice answered on the first ring, as if she had been waiting for the call. This is Jimmy Sullivan. I am hauling biological samples from Hartford to Atlanta, and the temperature control is failing. The cargo is also making noises. What is your current location? Route 95 near Fredericksburg, Virginia. Maintain your current course and speed. Do not stop except for fuel. We are dispatching a response team to meet you at the delivery location. What exactly am I hauling? I demanded. These samples are acting like they are alive. That is classified information. Just complete your delivery as instructed. She hung up before I could ask any more questions. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then walked back to my trailer and pressed my ear against the side wall again. The sounds had changed completely. Instead of random tapping and scratching, I could hear what sounded unmistakably like voices. Muffled and distorted, but definitely human voices speaking in a language I did not recognize. And they seemed to be responding to each other, having conversations between the different containers. I backed away from the trailer and got into my cab as quickly as possible. Whatever was in those containers, it was not dead biological samples. It was something alive, something intelligent, and something that had been getting stronger as the temperature controls failed. The next 4 hours were the longest of my life. I drove straight through to Atlanta without stopping, even when my fuel gauge dropped dangerously low. The sounds from the trailer grew louder and more agitated with each passing mile. By the time I reached Georgia, it sounded like a full-scale riot was happening in my cargo bay. The delivery location was not a research facility as I had been told. It was a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of Atlanta, surrounded by high fences and security cameras. Armed guards directed me to a specific loading dock where a team of people in hazmat suits was waiting. "Get out of your truck and move to the designated safe zone," one of them ordered through a megaphone. "Do not approach the trailer." I parked where they indicated and walked to an area marked with yellow tape about 50 yards from my rig. From there, I watched as the hazmat team approached my trailer with equipment that looked more military than medical. They had some kind of scanning device that they pointed at the containers, and whatever it detected made them all step back quickly. "Temperature failure has accelerated the process," I heard one of them say into a radio. "Samples are approaching full activation. We need the suppression team here now." More vehicles arrived, including what looked like a mobile laboratory and several unmarked vans full of personnel in military-style gear. They set up a perimeter around my trailer and began unloading equipment I could not identify. The sounds coming from my cargo had reached a crescendo. Even from 50 yards away, I could hear what sounded like screaming mixed with an inhuman chittering noise that made my teeth ache. The trailer was actually rocking back and forth now, as if something inside was throwing itself against the walls. "What the hell did you people make me transport?" I shouted at the nearest hazmat suit. "That is classified," came the reply. "But you did your job well. The specimens arrived before full activation, which gives us a window to contain them." "Specimens?" Those things are talking to each other. No, they are not. They are replicating human speech patterns as part of their biological mimicry. Everything you think you are hearing is just sophisticated camouflage. The suppression team moved in with what looked like some kind of sonic weapon. They aimed it at my trailer and activated it, producing a sound so low and powerful that I could feel it in my bones. The screaming from the containers immediately stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow even more terrifying. It took them 6 hours to safely unload the containers and transport them to wherever they were really supposed to go. They paid me in cash, double the agreed amount, along with a non-disclosure agreement that came with some very specific legal threats about what would happen if I ever talked about what I had seen. I signed the papers and drove my empty trailer back to Boston, but I have never been the same since that trip. I still drive trucks for a living, but I ask a lot more questions about my cargo these days. And I never ever haul anything marked as biological samples. Sometimes, late at night when I am driving through remote areas, I think I can still hear those voices in the back of my trailer, whispering conversations in languages that should not exist, planning things that human minds are not meant to understand. I have tried to research what those specimens might have been, but every internet search turns up nothing. The medical supply company in Hartford closed down a week after my delivery, and the research facility in Atlanta does not exist according to any public records. All I know for certain is that there are things in this world that should not be transported by truck drivers who are just trying to make an honest living. Things that wake up when they get warm, things that learn to mimic human voices, things that should probably stay buried in whatever laboratory created them. I still have nightmares about what would have happened if those temperature controls had failed completely while I was still on the road. What if those containers had opened while I was sleeping in a truck stop or broken down in a populated area? Some cargo is not worth any amount of money, and some questions are better left unasked. Weigh stations are just part of the job, routine stops that blend together. But the abandoned one outside Bakersfield had an inspector who refused to clock out. My name is Rosa Martinez, and I have been hauling produce out of El Paso for 15 years. In all that time, I have rolled through hundreds of weigh stations across the Southwest, from California to Texas and everywhere in between. They are all basically the same. Drive onto the scale, wait for the green light, get your clearance, and roll on down the road. That is why what happened at the old Kern County weigh station still haunts me to this day. It was August 18th, 2023, and I was running a load of peppers and onions from Fresno to Phoenix. The produce market pays well, but timing is everything. Fresh vegetables have a narrow window, and every hour of delay means money out of my pocket. I had been pushing hard to make up time after a breakdown in Fresno had cost me half a day. The GPS was routing me through Bakersfield on Highway 58, a route I had taken dozens of times before. But as I approached the city limits just after midnight, I saw something that confused me. The electronic road signs were directing all commercial vehicles to a weigh station that I knew had been closed for at least 5 years. The Kern County facility had been shut down due to budget cuts, replaced by a newer station 20 miles south on I-5. I had seen the abandoned building many times on previous trips, its windows boarded up and parking area cracked with weeds growing through the asphalt. But tonight the signs were clearly indicating that it was open and all trucks were required to stop. I figured there must be some kind of special inspection going on, maybe related to the agricultural cargo I was carrying. California was always cracking down on produce transport to prevent the spread of invasive insects. So I followed the signs and took the exit toward the old weigh station. The access road was in worse shape than I remembered, full of potholes that jarred my cab and made my cargo shift. But as I got closer to the facility, I could see lights in the windows and what looked like an inspector's booth that was occupied. Someone was definitely working there. I pulled onto the scale and waited for instructions. Through my windshield, I could see a figure in the booth, silhouetted against the bright fluorescent lights inside. He was wearing the standard Department of Transportation uniform and appeared to be reviewing paperwork. After about a minute, a voice crackled over the intercom system. "Good evening, driver. Please shut off your engine and prepare for inspection." The voice sounded strange, distorted by static and an odd echo that made it hard to understand. But way station audio systems were notoriously poor, so I did not think much of it. I shut down the engine and gathered my logbook, bill of lading, and driver's license. "Exit your vehicle and report to the inspection office," the voice continued. "Bring all required documentation." I climbed out of my cab and walked toward the building. Up close, I could see that it was in much worse condition than it had appeared from a distance. The paint was peeling, the windows were cracked, and there were gaps in the siding where the weather had taken its toll. But the lights were on, and I could see the inspector waiting for me inside. The door to the office was heavy and creaked loudly when I opened it. Inside, the building smelled like mildew and something else I could not identify. Something chemical and unpleasant. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. The inspector was sitting behind a metal desk that looked like it had been salvaged from the 1970s. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and thick glasses, wearing a DOT uniform that seemed too big for his thin frame. His skin had a pale, waxy appearance, and he did not look up when I entered. "Documentation," he said without raising his eyes from the papers scattered across his desk. I handed him my license, logbook, and bill of lading. He examined each document carefully, making notes on a clipboard with a pen that looked like it was running out of ink. The scratching sound it made on the paper was the only noise in the room besides the buzzing lights. "Purpose of trip?" he asked in that same flat, emotionless voice. "Hauling produce from Fresno to Phoenix. Peppers and onions, agricultural cargo." He nodded and made more notes. "Duration of previous rest period?" I checked my logbook. 10 hours at a truck stop in Fresno. All within regulations. Weight of cargo? 34,000 pounds, well within legal limits. He continued asking questions for what felt like 20 minutes, covering every detail of my trip, my cargo, and my driving record. Most of the questions were standard, but some were strange. He wanted to know about my family, where I lived, whether I had any medical conditions. Things that had nothing to do with commercial vehicle inspection. Throughout the questioning, I noticed that he never once looked directly at me. His eyes remained fixed on his paperwork even when he was speaking, and his breathing seemed wrong somehow, too shallow and irregular. "I need to inspect your cargo," he finally said, standing up from his desk. "Follow me." We walked back outside to my trailer. He pulled out a flashlight and began examining the exterior, checking the seals and looking for any signs of tampering. Everything seemed normal until he opened the rear doors. The smell hit me immediately. My cargo of fresh vegetables, which had been perfect when I loaded it 6 hours earlier, now reeked of decay. The inspector shined his flashlight into the trailer, and I could see that the produce was rotting. Not just wilted or slightly spoiled, but completely decomposed, as if it had been sitting in the heat for weeks. "This cargo is contaminated," he said, matter-of-factly. "Cannot proceed to destination." "That is impossible," I protested. "This load was fresh when I picked it up. The refrigeration unit has been running perfectly." He ignored my protests and walked to the side of the trailer where the temperature gauge was mounted. The display, which should have been showing 36 degrees Fahrenheit, was reading 78 degrees. but I could hear the refrigeration unit running and the gauge in my cab had shown normal temperatures throughout the trip. "Unit failure," he said, making more notes on his clipboard. "Cargo must be disposed of immediately. Follow me to the quarantine area." He led me to a section of the facility I had not noticed before, a fenced area behind the main building where several other trailers were parked. All of them appeared to be abandoned, their tires flat and their paint faded by years of exposure to the elements. "Unhook your trailer here," he instructed. "You can pick up a replacement at the Phoenix terminal." "I cannot just abandon my cargo," I said. "This represents thousands of dollars in losses. I need to contact my dispatcher, file insurance claims." "Contaminated cargo must be quarantined immediately," he replied in that same emotionless tone. "No exceptions. Unhook your trailer now." Something about the whole situation felt wrong, but I was dealing with a government inspector and refusing to comply with DOT orders could cost me my commercial license. I reluctantly unhooked my trailer and left it in the quarantine area. "Report to the office to complete the paperwork," he said, walking back toward the building. I followed him inside, where he handed me a stack of forms to fill out. The paperwork was unlike anything I had seen before, full of legal language about biological hazards and federal quarantine procedures. Some of the text was so faded it was barely readable, and the forms themselves looked decades old. As I was signing the last page, I happened to glance at the inspector's desk and saw something that made my blood run cold. Among the scattered papers was an employee identification card, and I could see the photo clearly. It was definitely the same man who had been questioning me, but the card was dated 1987. The man in the photo looked exactly the same age as the inspector sitting across from me, down to the same graying hair and thick glasses. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How long have you been working here?" For the first time during our entire interaction, he looked directly at me. His eyes were completely white. No pupils or iris visible, just milky cataracts that should have left him completely blind. "Since 1987, he said simply. "Night shift, Monday through Friday. 36 years of service." "But this facility closed in 2018, I said. "It has been abandoned for years." He smiled then, and I could see that his teeth were black and rotting. "Closed to the public, yes, but the work continues. It always continues." I backed toward the door, no longer caring about the paperwork or procedures. "I need to go. I have to get to Phoenix." "You are free to leave," he said, returning his attention to his papers. "Your cargo will be properly disposed of. Have a safe trip." I ran to my cab and started the engine, not bothering to do my usual pre-trip inspection. I just wanted to get away from that place as quickly as possible. As I pulled out of the facility, I looked back in my mirrors and saw that the lights in the building were going out one by one, until the entire way station was dark and abandoned again. I drove straight to Phoenix without stopping, even though I was running on fumes by the time I reached the terminal. When I reported the incident to my dispatcher, he told me there was no record of any inspection at the Kern County facility. According to DOT records, no commercial vehicles had been processed there since 2018. The insurance company refused to pay for my lost cargo, claiming there was no evidence of any legitimate inspection or quarantine order. The trailer I had left behind was never found, despite multiple searches of the abandoned facility. I have driven past that way station many times since that night, always during daylight hours. It looks exactly as it should, abandoned, boarded up, with weeds growing through the parking lot. But sometimes, if I am driving that route late at night, I can see lights in the windows and a figure moving around inside. Other drivers have started reporting similar experiences. Trucks being directed to closed way stations, inspectors who ask strange questions, cargo that spoils for no apparent reason. The stories are always the same: normal inspection procedures that turn surreal, officials who should not exist, and losses that cannot be explained. I avoid Highway 58 after dark now, taking longer routes that add hours to my trips. Some people say I am being paranoid, that stress and fatigue are playing tricks on my mind. But I know what I saw in that inspector's eyes, and I know what happened to my cargo. Some inspectors take their job so seriously that even death cannot make them clock out. And some way stations never really close, no matter what the official records say. I have been driving these highways for 32 years, but what happened on I-80 through Nebraska changed everything I thought I knew about this job. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I have been hauling freight across this country since I was barely old enough to get my CDL. In all those years, through every storm, breakdown, and sleepless night, I thought I had seen it all. I was wrong. It was February 15th, 2023, and I was making my usual run from Denver to Chicago with a load of electronics. The weather had been brutal that winter, with blizzards hitting the Midwest harder than they had in decades. Most of the smaller trucking companies had pulled their drivers off the road, but we were behind schedule, and my dispatcher made it clear that stopping was not an option. I remember the exact moment everything changed. It was 2:47 a.m. according to my dashboard clock, and I was somewhere between Grand Island and Lincoln, Nebraska. The snow was coming down so hard that my wipers could barely keep up, and the road ahead looked like a white tunnel disappearing into nothing. My CB had been quiet for hours, which was unusual even for that time of night. Most drivers had probably found somewhere safe to wait out the storm. That is when I saw him. At first, it was just a dark shape on the side of the road, barely visible through the swirling snow. As I got closer, I could make out the figure of a man standing next to what looked like a broken-down pickup truck. He was waving his arms frantically, clearly desperate for help. Now, picking up hitchhikers is against company policy, and it is dangerous as hell, but this was different. The temperature was dropping below zero, and leaving someone stranded in a blizzard like that would have been a death sentence. I pulled over about 50 yards past where he was standing and put my hazards on. Through my mirror, I watched him trudge through the snow toward my cab. He was wearing an old denim jacket and jeans, completely inappropriate for the weather. No hat, no gloves, nothing. By the time he reached my passenger door, he should have been half frozen to death, but when I rolled down the window, he was not even shivering. "Thank you so much for stopping," he said, his voice calm and clear despite the howling wind. "My truck broke down about 10 miles back. I have been walking for hours." Something about that did not add up. 10 miles in this weather would have taken him most of the night, and he looked like he had just stepped out of a heated building. But people handle extreme cold differently, and I figured the adrenaline was probably keeping him warm. "Climb on in," I told him. "I can take you as far as Lincoln." He pulled himself up into the cab and settled into the passenger seat. That is when I got my first good look at him. He appeared to be in his 30s with dark hair and pale skin. His clothes, which should have been soaked through from the snow, were completely dry. Even his shoes showed no signs of the slush and ice that covered the highway. "I really appreciate this," he said, buckling his seatbelt. "Name is David Walsh." "Marcus Thompson," I replied, putting the truck back in gear. "Where you headed?" "Home," he said simply. "Been away too long." We pulled back onto the highway, and I tried to make conversation. In my experience, people who have just been rescued from a life-threatening situation are usually pretty chatty, full of adrenaline and relief. But David was different. He answered my questions with single words or short phrases, always staring straight ahead through the windshield. About 20 minutes into the ride, something started bothering me. The cab of a semi gets warm pretty quickly with 2 people in it, especially with the heater running full blast. I had already unzipped my jacket and rolled up my sleeves. But David had not moved. He still sat there in that denim jacket, not showing any signs of being too warm or too cold. Just perfectly comfortable, like he was sitting in an air-conditioned room. "You want me to turn the heat down?" I asked. "I am fine," he said. "Just fine." That is when I noticed something else. Every time I exhaled, I could see my breath in the cold air near the windows where the heat had not reached yet. But David was not breathing at all. No visible breath, no rise and fall of his chest. Nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid. The poor guy was probably in shock from being stranded in the cold for so long. People react differently to trauma. But as the miles passed, more details started to bother me. He never blinked, not once in the entire time he had been in my cab. His hands, which should have been red and chapped from the cold, were completely unmarked. And there was something about the way he smelled, or rather the way he did not smell. After walking through a blizzard for hours, he should have smelled like wet clothes and sweat. Instead, there was nothing. Just the usual diesel and coffee smell of my cab. We were about 10 miles outside Lincoln when David spoke again. "This is where it happened," he said quietly. "Where what happened?" "The accident. Right here on this stretch of road." I looked around, but all I could see was snow-covered farmland on both sides of the highway. "What accident?" "February 15th, 1987. I was driving home from work when the storm hit, lost control right here." He pointed to a spot ahead of us that looked identical to every other part of the road we had been traveling on. Truck went into the ditch and flipped. Took them 3 days to find me. The date hit me like a punch to the gut. February 15th. Today was February 15th, exactly 36 years later. "David," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "what year do you think it is?" He turned to look at me for the first time since getting in the truck. His eyes were completely black, not just the pupils, but the entire eye. There was no life in them, no warmth, just an endless void that seemed to pull at something deep inside me. "It is 1987, he said. "I am going home to my wife. She is making pot roast tonight, my favorite." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the truck on the road. Every instinct was screaming at me to pull over and get this thing out of my cab, but another part of me, the part that had been driving these roads for 3 decades, told me to keep going. Whatever David was, he did not seem hostile, just lost. "David," I said as gently as I could, "I need to tell you something. It is not 1987, it is 2023. 36 years have passed." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was filled with a sadness so deep it made my chest ache. "She waited for me, you know. Every night for 15 years, she would set a place for me at the dinner table. The pot roast would get cold, but she would wait. She never stopped believing I would come home." "What happened to her?" I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know. "Cancer took her in 2002. I felt it when she passed, felt the last thread connecting me to the world break. I have been walking this road ever since, trying to find my way back to that night, trying to get home before the storm hits." The Lincoln exit was coming up ahead. I had promised to take him that far, but now I did not know what to do. How do you drop off a ghost at a truck stop? "This is my exit," David said, as if reading my thoughts. "Thank you for the ride, Marcus. It has been a long time since someone showed me kindness." I pulled off at the exit and brought the truck to a stop at the red light. When I turned to say goodbye, the passenger seat was empty. No sign that anyone had been there at all. The seatbelt was still buckled, but there was no indentation in the seat, no warmth left behind. I sat there for several minutes trying to process what had just happened. Part of me wondered if I had hallucinated the entire thing, if the long hours and bad weather had finally gotten to me. But then I noticed something on the dashboard that had not been there before. It was an old Polaroid photograph. Faded and worn around the edges, it showed a young man with dark hair standing next to a pickup truck. The same face I had been looking at for the past hour, but younger, more alive. On the back, someone had written in faded ink, "David Walsh, February 1987. Safe travels, honey. Love, Linda?" I kept that photograph on my dashboard for the rest of my career. Every time I passed through that stretch of I-80, I would slow down and scan the roadside, wondering if I would see him again. I never did, but I heard stories from other drivers over the years. A hitchhiker in Nebraska who disappears from moving trucks. A man in a denim jacket who never gets cold. Someone looking for a way home to a dinner that will never be served. I retired last year after 33 years on the road. The photograph is framed on my wall now next to my first CDL and a picture of my own family. Sometimes when the snow starts falling and the wind picks up, I think about David Walsh and wonder if he ever found his way home. I hope he did. I hope wherever Linda is, they are together again, and the pot roast is still warm. But on nights like tonight, when the weather turns bad and the highways get dangerous, I find myself saying a little prayer for all the lost souls still wandering our roads, still trying to find their way back to the people they love. The road is a lonely place, and sometimes the dead are just as lost as the living. Some say every trucker gets one last ride, a final delivery that takes them off the road forever. Mine came with GPS coordinates to a place that does not exist on any map. My name is Frank Kowalski, and I have been running freight out of Chicago for 43 years. In all that time, from the CB radio days to GPS navigation, I thought I had seen every mile of highway in America. I was wrong about a lot of things. It was January 21st, 2024, and I was 3 weeks away from retirement. After 4 decades of hauling everything from steel to groceries across this great country, I was finally ready to hang up my keys and spend time with my grandchildren. My dispatcher knew about my plans, which is why he was surprised when the special delivery request came in specifically asking for me by name. "Frank," he said over the phone, "and I got a strange one here. Customers requesting you personally for a priority run, paying triple rate cash on delivery." "What kind of load?" I asked, though the money had already caught my attention. Triple rate would make for a nice addition to my retirement fund. That is the weird part. They would not say what the cargo is, just that it needs to go to these specific coordinates. He rattled off a string of numbers that meant nothing to me. GPS shows it is somewhere in Montana, but I cannot find any roads or facilities at that location. Montana was not my usual territory, but I had hauled loads through Big Sky country before. Remote mining operations in oil fields sometimes required deliveries to places that barely existed on maps. When do they need it picked up? Today, customer will have the trailer ready at a warehouse on the south side. Address is 1247 Industrial Way. I drove my rig to the pickup location, expecting to find a standard loading dock or warehouse facility. Instead, 1247 Industrial Way turned out to be a small, unremarkable building with no company signs or markings. The only indication that it was a business was a single loading bay door and a man in a dark suit waiting beside it. The man appeared to be in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of pale complexion that suggested he spent most of his time indoors. He was checking his watch when I backed my truck up to the dock. "Mr. Kowalski," he said as I climbed out of my cab. "Right on time. We have been waiting for you." "What am I hauling?" I asked, looking at the sealed trailer that was already connected to the dock. It was painted flat black with no markings or identification numbers. "A passenger," he replied simply. "Someone who needs to reach their final destination." "I do not haul passengers. Company policy, insurance liability, the whole thing. You need a bus or an airline for that." This passenger will not be any trouble. They will remain in the cargo area for the entire trip. You will not even know they are there. Something about the whole setup felt wrong, but the money was too good to pass up. 3 times my normal rate for what sounded like a simple delivery run. How do I know this is not some kind of smuggling operation? I am not risking my license 3 weeks before retirement. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Your payment in advance, and documentation showing that this is a legitimate medical transport. He handed me papers that looked official enough, with medical facility letterheads and transport authorizations. Medical transport? The passenger is terminally ill. This is their final journey home. They requested specifically that an experienced driver handle the transport. Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Kowalski. That changed everything. I had transported sick people before, usually family members of truckers who needed to get to hospitals or specialist facilities. It was not exactly legal, but it was one of those gray areas that most dispatchers and DOT officers looked the other way on if the circumstances were right. Where exactly am I taking them? I asked, looking at the GPS coordinates again. Northwestern Montana, near the Canadian border. The passenger will guide you to the exact location when you get close. I signed the paperwork and accepted the trailer, which was sealed and locked. The man assured me that the passenger had everything they needed for the journey and would not require any stops or assistance. I was to drive straight through, following the GPS coordinates until I reached the destination. The first day of the trip was uneventful. I made good time through Illinois, Iowa, and South Dakota, stopping only for fuel and meals. The trailer rode smoothly, and I heard no sounds from the cargo area. Whatever medical equipment was back there, it was well secured and quiet. It was not until I reached North Dakota that I started noticing strange things about my cargo. Every time I stopped for fuel, the trailer felt different when I did my walk-around inspection. Not heavier or lighter, just different in a way I could not explain. The temperature gauge showed normal readings, but the metal felt cold to the touch even in the afternoon sun. Around midnight, somewhere on a remote stretch of Highway 2 near the Montana border, my CB radio crackled to life. "Driver," a voice said. It was weak and tired, like someone speaking through great pain. "Driver, can you hear me?" I grabbed the handset. "This is Frank. Who is this? How are you transmitting on Channel 19? I am your passenger. Thank you for accepting this job. I know it is unusual. Are you okay back there? Do you need medical attention?" "I am beyond medical attention now, but I need to reach my destination. It is very important that I get home." There was something about the voice that made me deeply sad. It reminded me of my own father's voice during his final weeks, when the cancer had taken everything from him except his determination to say goodbye to the people he loved. "Where exactly is home?" I asked. "You will know when we get there. Just follow the coordinates. And Frank?" "Yeah? Thank you for doing this. Most drivers would not have taken this job." The radio went silent after that, and I did not hear from my passenger again for several hours. But I could feel their presence in a strange way, like the weight of someone's hopes and dreams pressing down on the entire rig. As I drove through the empty Montana landscape, the GPS began acting strangely. The coordinates it was directing me toward seemed to be moving, shifting slightly every few minutes as if the destination was not quite fixed in place. The roads shown on the display did not match what I was seeing through my windshield, and several times I found myself driving on highways that should not have existed according to the map. Around 4 a.m., the voice came back on the radio. "Frank, we are getting close now. Thank you for bringing me this far. How are you feeling back there?" "Peaceful. More peaceful than I have felt in a very long time. The pain is almost gone now." I was starting to understand that this was not a normal medical transport. Whatever was happening in my trailer, It was something beyond my experience as a truck driver. But I had made a commitment, and I intended to see it through. The GPS directed me off the main highway onto a series of increasingly remote roads. First paved two-lane highways, then gravel county roads, then dirt tracks that barely deserved to be called roads at all. My truck was not designed for this kind of terrain, but somehow it handled the rough ground without difficulty. Finally, just as the eastern sky was beginning to show the first hints of dawn, the GPS announced that I had reached my destination. I was in the middle of what looked like pristine wilderness, surrounded by tall pine trees and snow-capped mountains. There was no building, no facility, no indication that anyone had ever been in this place before. I parked the truck and got out to look around. The air was thin and cold, filled with the scent of pine and something else I could not identify. Something clean and eternal, like the smell of snow that has never been touched by human hands. "Frank," the voice came over the radio one final time. "This is perfect. This is exactly where I needed to be. I do not understand. There is nothing here. How are you getting home from the middle of nowhere?" "I am already home. I have been traveling toward this place for longer than you can imagine. Thank you for helping me complete the journey." I walked back to the trailer and tried the handle on the rear doors. They opened easily despite having been locked and sealed throughout the trip. Inside, the cargo area was empty except for a single hospital bed. The sheets were perfectly made, as if they had never been used, and there was no sign that anyone had ever been inside. On the pillow was a note written in shaky handwriting. "Frank, thank you for the final ride. The money in your cab is yours to keep. Tell my story to other drivers so they will understand that some journeys are longer than others. A grateful passenger." I looked in my cab and found an envelope with 10 times the amount I had been promised, along with a photograph of an elderly man in a hospital gown, smiling despite obvious illness. On the back of the photo was written, "William Henderson, 1943 to 2024. Home at last." I never found out who William Henderson was or how he had arranged for his final journey. The warehouse where I had picked up the trailer was empty when I went back to Chicago, with no forwarding address or contact information. The man in the dark suit had vanished as completely as my passenger. But I have thought about that trip every day since my retirement. I realize now that I was not just delivering cargo or transporting a passenger. I was helping someone complete a journey that had taken an entire lifetime, guiding a soul to the place where it belonged. They say every trucker gets one last ride, and mine taught me that some destinations cannot be found on any map. Some roads lead to places that exist beyond the physical world, and sometimes the most important cargo we carry is not freight at all, but faith, hope, and the final wishes of people who have run out of time. I never drove professionally again after that run, but I keep my CDL current, just in case someone else needs help finding their way home.